Welcome to Amplifying Leadership, a podcast where we talk leadership and all that it is with guest stories, wins, and even challenges. My name is Tara and I am a partner, coach, and consultant at Twin Life Coaching and Business Services, of which Amplifying Leadership is our division. For our leadership clients, we'd love to support you through this podcast, tools, coaching, training, and more as part of our leadership series. To learn more about our leadership division and our Amplifying Leadership community, please visit amplifyingleadership.ca. Today, I am welcoming Lucy Rowell, who spent 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry, but now helps individuals, teams, and organizations be more impactful through leveraging their authenticity. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tara. Super excited to be here.
Great. So why don't we start with a little bit about you and your leadership journey?
Yeah. So for me, it's a kind of interesting journey, hopefully, for people to sort of listen to. So growing up, I was the first person in my family to have even considered going to university, never mind kind of completing a degree in further higher education. And so I didn't really have a lot of people around me that helped sort of guide or be sort of role models for sort of what leadership would be, or even what sort of a career would kind of look like. And so I found myself very early in my sort of career self-navigating a lot. I'd say stumbling between different kind of roles and different things, just as I was trying to kind of gather my feet to sort of what it was to be sort of in the world of work. And I was really lucky, as you said, I have worked in the pharmaceutical company for over 20 years in a big, large global organization. And there it was just a complete sort of breath of fresh air in terms of the amount of opportunities just felt so endless, and everything was kind of new and exciting. And I think of my leadership story, as well as that part sort of at the beginning where it was a little bit kind of unsure, into two sort of parts. The first probably was over that first 10 years. And there, for me, I was really looking at others. What was making other people successful? What did I need to do to replicate what they were doing? You know, how did I need to show up? How did I present myself? I would class myself as slightly more introverted than extroverted, but how could I lean more into that extroverted side of my personality? Because that's what I thought needed to be done to be successful. And so I had a great career for those first 10 years, do not get me wrong, but I was very much, I think, looking to others to get that sort of validation of what to do. And also, I think during that time, I had very sort of single-minded view on, there was one role I was really, really passionate that I wanted to do. It was leading a really large cross-functional matrixed team. It was a job that usually statisticians like myself didn't do, and certainly not statisticians who were based here in the UK. And so I was navigating a number of other different leadership roles with that one thing kind of in my mind. And after about 9 years into my career, I managed to get that role. And I was like so happy. It was probably the proudest and happiest time over my career so far to be able to get that. And I think it just opened a lot of interesting doors to me. I think one, which kind of leads to the second part of my kind of leadership story. One was just sort of not necessarily being so solely focused on one thing, like one role that's kind of guiding you forward. I think one of the things that we have very much in the UK now is a great community around trying to kind of navigate this what they call like this squiggly career path, where people are kind of hopping and jumping around
all over the place,
types of roles and things. And so I think once I kind of got more experienced, a bit more mature in my journey, I found much more that, one, I was more comfortable kind of hopping around and just going for things that may not initially on paper have looked like perfect fit. And secondly, I just grew in such huge confidence about who I was as a leader and where my strengths were and how I could help others to be, impactful, how I could help others to kind of find their own career and journey wherever that may take them. So I sort of feel there was this first part that was successful, but was sort of narrow in certain focus and very much a follower. And then this latter part, which was much more, this is me, this is who I'm about, kind of take me as I come, but also just allowed me to do much more exploration. And as long as I was learning and I was making a positive impact to myself and to others around me, like it didn't really matter what the job was. And as you said, I now have my own company. And so I kind of left the corporate world to do something else, which I am now thoroughly enjoying. I'm only kind of a handful of months into that. So I don't have loads of experience to talk about it, but it's definitely that career journey that I had has given me, from a leadership perspective, just more confidence in myself, I would say.
You're very lucky that your company allowed you to try a lot of different things. And I think a lot of leaders need to start to allow that to happen, because we do have a lot of people that want to try different things now, especially the younger generation. And it's a great way to develop skills and retain employees too, if you just see what it is that they want to try out and let them try. I had the same thing. I mean, I got into accounting with no experience. I just asked the controller, hey, do you mind interviewing me for the position? I need something different. And I got it. It was shocking, but I did. And it led to my leadership journey. So I love that you bring that up, only because I think it's so important, right now as well. So on that journey of yours, did you have like a big obstacle that kind of stood out to you that really was something that you had to overcome to move forward?
Yes, I would say there was one obstacle, but I'll actually address it, I think, from two different parts. And the obstacle for me is all around assumptions. So I think there was, assumptions from others. So who were sort of pegging me into certain roles or into certain areas that they felt, oh no, this is kind of the space for you, Lucy. This is kind of where you will work and be successful. And I didn't necessarily believe that was true. I thought, no, I think I would be amazing at doing X. So there was a little bit of that obstacle of assumptions, but I think there was also the assumptions that I kind of put on myself. So back to what I was saying before, that piece of like, oh, I actually need to be a little bit like X, or I need to do this to get that role or that opportunity. And while I don't think they eventually held me back, they definitely were very big struggles and obstacles at the beginning of my career that I absolutely had to try and navigate and figure out.
So I'm hearing, the authentic piece of you coming out, and you're developing and overcoming your challenges by your authentic self. Let's talk about that for a second. You did mention to me, like, being authentic as a leader is very, very important. Why do you believe this? Why do you think leaders should be completely authentic?
Yeah. Well, authentic leadership for me is a kind of really interesting one. And I guess that's partially why I decided to set up a company around it, because I think, we often, when we go and say do a leadership course, it feels very, again, like boxed. It feels like these are the things you need to do, be a great leader. But we all know, I mean, you just need to look around us at different types of presidents or people leading different organizations. Like, there's a whole heap of different styles and types of leaders that people voluntarily follow. And so I think for us, sort of looking at that as leaders, it's reassuring to know actually there are lots of different styles and ways that make really successful. So we should have some confidence to be able to say, actually, no, this is kind of who I am and this is what I'm going to do. And it's, the more people I've spoken to around this authenticity topic, it's has kind of created lots and lots of more questions, because people feel like it sounds simple. Authenticity is, what you say and do reflects who you are. That feels pretty straightforward. But actually, it becomes really, really tricky. And again, I've experienced that, as I spoke about before. And I think for me, there's sort of two reasons why it's really important, and why I sort of really believe in it. And the first is, I think, just if we think about it as, somebody that we want to be led by. So there's there's the leader who's leading, and there's the people who are kind of following. And when you're being led by someone, we can kind of tell over time if someone's being authentic or not. And if they're not being authentic, that really erodes trust. And we know that trust is kind of one of the biggest things in terms of whether that be relationships or teams or other things. If you lose that, you're just in a really, really tricky situation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I think the more that, people can be confident in being authentic, the more you'll kind of find the people who like and appreciate that kind of style and what you're interested in and how you work. And again, we all like different things there. And you'll also help inspire people more if you can be more authentic to kind of who you are. So I think there's the one piece about the people that you're leading. I think the second piece is obviously about yourself and that personal perspective as a leader. And we know the basics of, okay, if you're not authentic, yes, it takes time and, effort and energy. You're having to kind of think, I want to do this, but I can't. I'm going to have to do X, etc.
Right.
So there's those parts. But I think if you think about it at that sort of linking back with that, the people that you're leading, etc., I think we often make the mistake of thinking that leaders and many others, again, you can pick one leader up and place them somewhere else, and no matter where you put them, they're going to be successful if they're great leaders. And that really, really isn't the case. And there's lots of different examples where people have come in and done great jobs at certain times, left and come back, and then it's not quite gelled in the same way. And I think what we need to be able to be clear about is what is the things that, who are we? What are the strengths that we have? And what is that right context for us? Because if we want to be a successful leader, if we're not kind of true to what that right space is, then we're actually going to just set ourselves up for failure. And then we're likely to set up, whether it's the companies and the other people around us that we're sort of there to lead and help support, also up for failure. So those are a couple of things. I can probably talk about this for hours, but I'll make there that are kind of, I think, probably some of the most pivotal things for me as people think about kind of authentic leadership.
Yes, and I like that you also kind of touch on values. Your own personal values are what make you authentic if you use them, right? And you sort of touched on that. So I kind of want to just talk about that for just a minute. I mean, a lot of leaders don't realize that their personal values and their company values and how they lead teams should be coming out. As when I help some career clients, I make sure they understand their values and then the company values, and do they mesh, or is there an issue? What are your thoughts around values with being authentic or within leadership?
Yeah, great question. So I absolutely usually say to people, you should understand what your values are. And even if you don't think you've got some, you actually do. You probably just have a drink, have a dinner with somebody, and very quickly you'll start to see. I think where things start to go wrong, and what I was loving hearing from you, Tara, is this piece about when things are a little bit in disconnect. And I think one of the easiest ones that a lot of people can kind of quite quickly grapple with is this thing about, family and friendships. Like most people say, yeah, one of my values outside work, is being a great, husband, wife, brother, sister, friend, all of these great things. But then actually the actions that they do not support that. So suddenly actually you're the one who's working 60, 70-hour week. And the feeling is, yes, I want to do that so I can, provide money and support for my family and friends. But actually, if you go and speak to most of your family and friends, what they want to do is spend quality time with you,
Time. Yeah.
giggle and laugh and going to the cinema or whatever that would be. So I think for me, what I find really helpful if you think through the values is trying to help give you a little bit of a guide for decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to hold yourself to account of, well, am I doing that? Because I think otherwise we can kind of fall into some slippery slope that are
Mm-hmm.
not really, they're not meant out of any sort of negligence. It's just
Yeah.
that you kind of get onto the hamster wheel and then you kind of keep going and moving and things happen. So usually what I do when I'm feeling in a little bit of a flux, a little bit of a tip for people is I actually just make sure that I've kind of got my 4 or 5 values and they change. They're not the same all the
Mm-hmm.
time. They, actually just on the side of my, oh, well, I'm looking at you here on the screen. So by the side of
Yeah.
my screen on my desk, and if work comes in or if even fun things come in, I kind of look to see actually, is that something I'm wanting to kind of focus on as a value at the minute or not? Does it work? Does it blend with that or not?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, so it's all about the blending and making sure that it works with whatever you're doing. So as leaders, we need to make sure that we're being authentic with our own values and that we bring that. So I love your work-life balance one, where we're talking about if family and that is one of your values and you're working 70, 80 hours a week, is it truly a value for you? I mean, you need to reassess.
Yeah.
And if it is, then you need to reassess the work values, right? So yeah, I like that you did touch on
Mm.
that. So I want to change it over to another topic that you told me that you
Yeah.
like to talk about, and that is breaking out of stereotypes.
Mm.
So tell us a little bit more about that and why it's important to leadership.
Yeah. So I think for me, again, there's like a couple of parts to this, and I really love this topic because I think one, it kind of touches on a super high topic that kind of is on everybody's mind, which is around kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Any company, pretty much that you're in, they probably have that as a priority or something very high on their list. But
Yeah.
for me, it goes back a little bit to what I was talking about before in terms of this piece of moving people, thinking about people in terms of maybe the role they're in. And I pick a super simple thing like, I need a chemistry teacher. Oh, there's one here. I'll just pick them up and move them and put them here and
Mm-hmm.
expect that they're going to work. And the one that I see a lot and hear a lot about is actually recruitment. And, we need a new graduate. Okay, let's just go to the top universities. We will find our best graduate there. And you've
Mm-hmm.
already shared your beautiful story, Tara, about, your accounting,
Yeah.
position, etc. And so I think for me, there's just this big piece of one, we know diversity, equity, and inclusion is really high on everybody's lists, and
Mm-hmm.
that very much feeds into stereotypes and breaking out the box. But then there's this other part that we also talked about, which is that actually most people now, particularly sort of young people entering the workplace, do not want to be on a very straight up predetermined
I
career ladder.
know. Yeah.
They really do want to explore and do different things. And so, you know, I love this idea of, we all come with our own lived experience, no matter what that is. Even if on our CV of paper, we've got the same degree from the same university, we've got the same kind of schooling, we've got all of these other things, just, probably how our parents have brought us up, our siblings, our other pieces that are
Mm-hmm.
around you will have had an influence on how you think, how you make decisions, how you work with others, and all of these other great qualities. So for me, I think if we've got to be much more open to figuring out how to kind of break people out of the stereotypes and give people some more kind of creative flow. But I will say, I do appreciate this is really, really tricky for leaders because it's more complex. It's certainly
Mm-hmm.
more time consuming. And as leaders, we're usually trying to find like, how can we kind of be efficient? How can we make some quick wins? How can we move things forward? How can we not kind of get stuck? And often with some of these things, it will take longer, it will be more complex, and it will, we are kind of in a sense like reinventing a wheel with some of these things. So again, if we go back to the recruitment kind of example, usually for roles at the moment, certainly roles that we've been recruiting for not that long ago, we were getting like thousands of applicants. Well, you can't bring every single person in and ask them about their life story and see who we think is going to be an amazing fit. So I completely agree. There will be criteria that you're using to sort of filter people through the funnel. I think what I would really ask leaders to think about, though, is, what are those things that you're using to filter? Because usually when I've spoken to leaders, and even, in my previous corporate life, what actually was happening, we were just using things we'd been using for the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And there were people who really did believe in those things, and that's fine. But we have to recognize that you will definitely, encourage certain types of characteristics and rule out others with those kinds of approaches. And I think as long as we as leaders are being sort of mindful and thoughtful about that, then I think it's fine. I think we just need to recognize if we're following the same script, we're not going to get a different answer out the back. And if we want a different answer, we have to think about what we're doing up front to be able to kind of create that slightly different sort of output at the end. So again, I know it's tricky, and I'm not trying to pretend it isn't. But I do think if we can think about ways to make it become more of a norm, then actually it will become an easier option. But it will just take a little bit of discomfort probably to get there.
And it's interesting that you bring up recruiting because, a lot of people when they post job ads, it's something from so many years ago. They're still saying, okay, this position has to have, I don't know, a degree in ABC. But what about somebody who doesn't have that degree, but has 20 years in it?
Yeah.
Who is better? You don't know. Yeah. So you really need to, like you said, figure out what those funnels are and get them right and update them every time you post for a job because so much has changed. And if you're using that stuff from 10, 15, even 20 years ago, you're going to possibly be missing out on your star employee because you didn't look at it differently. So those screening questions and stuff need to be reviewed to make sure that you're not letting someone through the cracks that maybe who you truly, truly wanted. Yeah. Great.
I mean, we have this really interesting scenario in about 10, 15 years ago, there was new leadership came in and everybody needed to have a PhD. I didn't have a PhD.
Good example.
Majority of people didn't have a PhD. But the amount of people who started alongside their jobs learning for a PhD because they were worried about what the future was going to look like. Now, thankfully, a lot of them went and got PhDs, great for them. But it's this very bizarre scenario. In fact, I was just talking to somebody at the weekend about, I have a little boy who's 3, and we were kind of saying probably when they're kind of going off after their schooling, university may not even be kind of what everybody's looking for, the gold star. It's probably going to be apprenticeships, much more hands-on experience, how people kind of interact and learn, and what sparks people's kind of curiosity to do stuff rather than just learning from a textbook. Anyway,
almost the human behavior side rather than the textbook side, or a mix or something. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, I've had a wonderful conversation today. If you had to give our audience that one big tip, that key takeaway today, what would you say that would be?
So I would say spend some time understanding who you are. And as I mentioned earlier, it is kind of constantly changing, but you'll probably create some really interesting insights about yourself if you haven't done this kind of thing before.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're likely to do is actually start kind of getting curious and inspired by that to help then others think a little bit about who they are, and how you can then kind of create a really positive impact for both yourself and for others around you. So yeah, if you've got some time this week, maybe just give yourself, half an hour with your favorite cup of tea, coffee, water, juice, whatever it is, to just, do a little bit of soul searching.
I love it. Self-discovery, something I think all leaders need to do, because you got to start with yourself in order to lead a great team. Wonderful. If anybody who was listening wanted to learn more about you or find you online or about your services, how can they do that?
Yeah, so 2 ways I would recommend. LinkedIn, if you look for Lucy Rowell on LinkedIn, I have a pretty great community of people there, and I always love to meet and find out new people. So you can contact me there or kind of follow. If not, you can go to the website impactfulauthenticity.me. That's the website. And I also have a podcast with the same name. So you can also search via your podcast streaming service of choice, the same one you're probably listening to this beautiful podcast on, if you want to hear me chatting to some guests about authenticity.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for a great conversation today and all of this amazing tips for our listeners.
You're welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a lovely day, everyone. Thanks, Tara.
Thank you. And of course, a thank you to our listeners. We both hope you are taking away some key points to help you grow on your leadership path. If you are new to leadership, or perhaps a seasoned leader who knows that support and developing your skills are the way to moving forward on your leadership journey, or you wish to join our Amplifying Leadership community, please visit amplifyingleadership.ca, a twin life coaching and business services division. Until next time, please be safe and be an amazing leader or leader to be.